Hello, true believers. This is Joel Clark here. You knew that already, of course. Lead designer of Lone Wolf Fist. I am currently working on the Loras chapter. I had a week or so when I kind of just was pecking at it and doing a lot of design like this, where I didn't actually get into the document. But this is actually a really important part of my design, where I'm actually like writing out my ideas, seeing what works and what doesn't, making lists, brainstorming. It's really important when you have a list-heavy chapter like this that still has to have like an internal logic and a consistency to it, because like it has to be creative enough that your players, your GMs in this is very much a GM only chapter, because like what are the players going to do with these big lists? But for GMs, like this has to be something that you couldn't think of as a no duh, of course I'm putting that in. It has to be unique enough to justify itself as a chapter full of lists and plot seeds and what have you. It also has to be consistent with itself, like it can't radically contradict itself, and it has to, like each one of these lores has to create an identity for a clan, just the same way that a bunch of pros would create a really clear, specific identity for a clan. Um, and it can be tough. I've not really allowed myself a whole lot in terms of just explaining to a GM, here is this place, this is what it's like, here are the people in it, here's what they're like. Like I want to do that the smallest amount as possible, just because it's not interesting. It's not something you can use at the table, really. Like you can read that prior to a game starting to give you as a GM context that you can then pitch to the players, but in practice, what happens is you just don't, like, you'll have all of that information in your head, and you'll either convey it to the players more or less as it exists on the page, or you will have to yourself create content based off of it. And if it's just the description on a page, it doesn't have the kind of friendly usability that something like the wonderful Yoonsoon lists have, where you have the names of organizations that are there, and the eccentricities and uniquenesses of them, and their goals, and the special things that they have, and the unique challenges that they face, and the geometry of the architecture that they live in, and the unique monsters of the place. Like everything, like there's just piles and piles and piles and piles of very specific concrete examples that are unique and evocative and usable. And so whenever you run Yoon Soon, what I find is that I read the intro to that book, which is a pretty lengthy intro, and then I would read over the sections, and I would just kind of glance over the majority of the list to get kind of a feel for what was there. And then in play, I was able to reference those and simply pull out what I needed whenever I needed something new. Oh, there really should be an Explorers Society here. Well, give me a D30 in a couple of minutes, and I'll make one, or even a couple of minutes, but like less than a minute in most cases. You roll it a few times, you write down the results, and you're like, okay, here's these guys. And it also worked whenever I was between sessions, because if I didn't know what to put in a given place, I could just look through the lists and say, you know what, this looks good, roll it up and stick it in there. And even if it never got used, it wasn't really wasted content, because again, it took me, what, a minute, 2 minutes to prep it? That's kind of the ideal for the Loras chapter. So far, the two lores that I've both completed and playtested work really well. I just completed the Scorpions today, and I'm finishing up the Lions now. Once the Lions are done, let me see who's after the Lions. I want to get these guys in sequence. Oh, I've been writing all day. I'm tired. Okay, so I've got the Lions, and then it's the Phoenix next. The Phoenix are going to be interesting, because they're a divided society. They have like a below and above ground. I've got a Brotherhood of Freaks after them. And then, yeah, it looks like the only one left after them are the 5-star spirits. The 5 stars are going to be interesting, too, by the way, because they're gone. So their lore isn't so much about like what they were like historically, which is one way I could have went with it. It's what they are now. Like if you go to the lands of the Lions and Heaven's Wheel, what do you find there now? And there's a lot of like legacy of their clan kind of stuck around here and there. Like whenever Aang revisited the Air Nomad temple that he grew up in, like there's a lot that kind of tells you about like who they were, how they died. And there's also a lot of other things, like there's other new societies that are moving in and trying to like integrate with the place, and I think that's really fascinating. It shows that there's like not necessarily a direct continuity there, but there's some sort of legacy that's left over. And again, whenever Aang and the crew, I just think they called them the gang, traveled to the other Air Nomad Temple, and they found inhabitants there that they weren't airbenders, but they were like experimenters and explorers and things like that. At first, Aang was like really upset about it, and then he kind of got won over by them because they had the same sort of spirit that airbenders had, even though they didn't have any magic. That was a really good episode, and it's that kind of stuff that I'm interested in, like programming into the Heaven's Wheel lore. And of course, there's plenty of monsters. I was really I didn't have enough Titans initially for the bestiary, so I just kind of started grabbing them randomly from different kinds of mythology, and I found a really cool one in Chinese mythology about this like ridiculously gigantic like Shenlong S dragon with an old man's face, and it was big enough that when it flew around, it would stir up like these entire tempests. And I was like, "That's great! Mountain-sized super dragon that can cause that can cause like gigantic tempests whenever it flies around. That sounds pretty rad." So they got a really cool Titan. I really want players to get eaten by it. It's just so gigantic and cool. Anyway, not much else on the other fronts. I haven't been able to go through too much more. I've been really concentrating on getting this writing done. Like I said, a lot of it's just this, and you can just, if you look through these, you're just gonna see like, here's the thesis of this clan. Here's my development of that thesis. Here's some specific examples I want to use. And then occasionally I see some that are like crossed out, or that I've got some redundancy with some of them. Because like with the brainstorming list, usually what I'll do is I'll do like one list, and I'll have most of what I can think of uniquely on it at that time, then I'll come back to it later. And sometimes I'll combine them, and sometimes I'll cross them out. And often you'll see several iterations of the same list, and I'll get the ultimate version of the best ideas that survived through the earlier versions. Anyway, let's see, what else? I still need to go and talk to everybody who got clans, or who paid for clans, the super backers as they are, and martial arts styles. There's one martial arts style that I've not even started yet. I need to talk with them. They also got a clan, I believe. So there's one person I gotta do a lot of work with. There's another martial arts style that is extremely, like, I've got my notes on it, and there's very, very little there. So I'm gonna have to go back and talk to them and be like, okay, what were we doing with this? Thank you very much for the money, but like, I want you to get your money's worth, so let's get this done. So expect another round of me talking to everyone about that stuff in the nearish future. Geez, I didn't have as much to say as I thought I did. I'm actually going to get well under 10 minutes this time. Look forward to the lores at some point in the next little bit. I'm doing as much as I can to finish those up ASAP. And once those are done, the document's basically done. There's still going to be a little bit of tweaks and tech edits from the latest playtest. And just from my own notes, there's a few things that are broken. Man, I really need to sit down and redesign the karma system. I like it conceptually, it just doesn't get used, and I can't think of a more damning thing for a system than simply not getting used. I kind of worry about my my GM chapters, or no, my domain chapter, as far as rules that I'm not sure how they're going to get used. Or whether they will get used. There's stuff in there that I think is really clever and hangs together in this really fascinating way, but it's pretty complicated. It's already a big ask, asking people to learn the game as far as they do, and also this is a game where you can rocket punch tank to death with your bare hands. So at the level at which you can do that, that's what I'm asking you to start forging kingdoms and like doing trade alliances and making markets and factories and blah blah nodes. So like, I mean, that's interesting conceptually and it works on paper, but in practice I don't know how often those things are going to survive the players just breathing fire on them. Be like, yeah, we don't need that. Whoosh. So yeah, the power level of the game might make a mockery of all of those wonderful, delicate systems I put together. We'll see. The idea is that it should do kind of what Exalted was trying to do, where like you can rule lands and you can also like destroy them, but it didn't work at Exalted either, so maybe it's a doomed dream. We'll find out together. In the meantime, I'll see you all next time.